Breaking news from the Mediterranean. Greta Thunberg, the world-famous climate activist, has just been detained. Israeli forces have stormed a humanitarian flotilla heading toward Gaza, sparking outrage across the globe. What really happened on that ship? Let's dive into the full story. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one that has shocked the world. Greta Thunberg, the iconic Swedish climate activist known for her peaceful protests, has reportedly been detained by Israeli forces during a dramatic operation at sea. The incident occurred as a flotilla of humanitarian activists attempted to reach Gaza with aid supplies. Eyewitnesses described the moment Israeli naval boats surrounded the flotilla, lights flashing, loudspeakers blaring warnings. Within minutes, commandos boarded several vessels, and Greta was among those on board. The activists were calling for an end to the Gaza blockade and demanded unrestricted humanitarian access. Greta's involvement brought massive international attention to the mission. The sudden confrontation, however, turned what was intended as a peaceful protest into a global flashpoint. As the world reacts in disbelief, we'll break down everything, from the flotilla's mission, Israel's justification for the raid, and what could happen next. Stay tuned, this story is unfolding rapidly. The flotilla, called Waves of Freedom, was organized by international human rights groups determined to deliver food, medicine, and clean water to Gaza, an area facing immense humanitarian challenges. Greta Thunberg joined the mission to amplify global attention, stating that silence is complicity. Sources say around 60 activists from more than 15 countries were on board multiple ships, flying flags of peace and banners reading, "Let Gaza Live." As they sailed closer to Gazan waters, tension mounted. Israeli authorities had already warned that any unauthorized entry into Gaza's maritime zone would be stopped, by all necessary means. Despite calls for negotiation, communication between the flotilla and Israeli Naval Command reportedly broke down hours before the interception. The moment Israeli forces advanced, the situation escalated quickly. Videos circulating online show flashing lights, chaotic shouts, and activists locking arms in protest. Greta was seen on deck wearing a life jacket, raising her hand in a sign of peace before being detained. Eyewitness accounts paint a tense, chaotic picture. As the Israeli Navy approached, they fired several warning shots into the air and demanded the flotilla stop immediately. When the vessels refused, Israeli commandos rappelled down from helicopters and boarded the lead ship. Within moments, loud confrontations erupted, activists shouting, "We are peaceful," while soldiers shouted orders in Hebrew and English. Several journalists on board captured the dramatic moments before their equipment was confiscated. Greta Thunberg, surrounded by other youth activists, was reportedly calm but visibly shaken. She reportedly told one officer, "The world is watching." Within minutes, she and several organizers were restrained and escorted off the deck. Israeli authorities say the flotilla violated security restrictions and posed a potential threat. However, activists insist they were unarmed and carrying only humanitarian goods. The clash has already triggered protests in Europe and strong statements from human rights organizations demanding Greta's release. International reaction has been swift. Within hours of the news breaking, Free Greta began trending across social media platforms. Major news outlets and celebrities voiced outrage. The United Nations called for restraint and transparency in handling the detainees. In Sweden, thousands gathered outside the Israeli embassy in Stockholm, demanding Greta's immediate release. Political leaders across Europe have urged Israel to clarify its actions, while supporters of Israel argue that the flotilla violated lawful boundaries. Meanwhile, footage of Greta being escorted away by naval officers has gone viral, drawing comparisons to previous flotilla incidents from a decade ago. Analysts say this moment could redefine the global conversation around both environmental activism and the Gaza conflict. What was meant to be a humanitarian voyage has now turned into a diplomatic storm. The question now, will this escalate further, or will diplomacy prevail? Behind the scenes, Israeli officials defend the operation as a security necessity. They claim that the flotilla was attempting to breach a naval blockade imposed to prevent weapons smuggling into Gaza. An official spokesperson stated, "Any vessel attempting unauthorized entry into Gaza will be intercepted. We cannot compromise national security." However, international law experts argue that seizing a civilian humanitarian ship in international waters could violate maritime conventions. Greta's legal team and fellow activists have already begun filing formal complaints through international human rights channels. The complexity of the case, mixing global activism, Israeli security policy and humanitarian intent, ensures it won't fade quickly. As the details unfold, one thing is clear: the detention of Greta Thunberg has ignited a global debate that crosses politics, law, and morality. Reports indicate the detained activists, including Greta, were transferred to a naval base near Ashdod for questioning. Lawyers and diplomatic representatives were reportedly denied immediate access. Inside the detention facility, conditions remain unclear. Some activists claim rough treatment during the boarding, though Israel denies any mistreatment. Greta, according to fellow detainees, continued to speak calmly, urging others to stay peaceful and strong. Meanwhile, protests have erupted in cities like London, Berlin, and New York, calling for accountability. Social media is ablaze with divided opinions. Some praising Greta's courage, others accusing her of political grandstanding. Either way, her involvement has forced the world to look once again at Gaza's humanitarian crisis, something the flotilla set out to highlight in the first place. Back in Gaza, families and aid workers waited anxiously for the flotilla's arrival. They had hoped the mission would deliver much-needed relief supplies and bring attention to worsening conditions. When news broke that the ships were seized, despair turned into anger. Crowds gathered near the coast, chanting for freedom and waving flags of peace. Several local organizations released statements praising Greta's bravery and condemning the Israeli action. International observers warn that such incidents only deepen the cycle of mistrust and tension. Yet, in the midst of political chaos, Greta's stance stands out. A young activist challenging one of the world's most complex conflicts through nonviolent means. Whether one agrees or not, her courage has forced a renewed global dialogue on human rights, freedom of protest, and the future of Gaza. Meanwhile, global leaders are stepping in. The European Union has called for an independent investigation into the incident. The Swedish government officially demanded consular access to Greta and other citizens detained. In Washington, U.S., officials released a cautious statement emphasizing Israel's right to security, but also calling for the fair treatment of all activists. United Nations representatives proposed forming a humanitarian review board to ensure transparency. Analysts say this crisis might pressure both Israel and international powers to revisit long-standing blockade policies. The situation has created a rare moment of global unity among human rights defenders, environmental activists, and humanitarian organizations, all rallying behind one name: Greta Thunberg. As hours turn into days, speculation grows about Greta's possible release. Unverified reports suggest negotiations are underway for the activists to be deported rather than charged. Public support continues to surge with massive rallies and online petitions demanding justice. Several celebrities and politicians have posted messages of solidarity, saying Greta's detention symbolizes the suppression of peaceful activism worldwide. Meanwhile, Israeli officials remain firm that their actions were lawful and proportionate. This standoff is now more than a maritime dispute. It's a clash of global narratives as security versus freedom, power versus protest. The longer Greta remains detained, the louder the global response becomes. And that's where the story stands tonight. Greta Thunberg, one of the world's most recognized activists, held after a dramatic confrontation at sea. The world is watching closely to see what happens next. Will international pressure secure her release? Or will this become another prolonged political standoff? We'll continue to track every update as it unfolds. If you found this report informative, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps our channel bring you the latest global stories that matter. Turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2 when new information drops. This is your host, signing off. Stay aware, stay informed, and never stop questioning.